I was locked outside barefoot in a blizzard by my own mom. Years later, a USB from my neighbor set off a reckoning none of them ever imagined. I was locked outside barefoot in a blizzard by my own mom. Years later, a USB from my neighbor set off a reckoning none of them ever imagined. Bat che du ho tro trin doc mon hin. De bat che du ho tro doc mon hin. Nan control plus alt plus z de tim hu them ve kak fim tat. Nan control plus dao gach keelan bo de tam gia veo tai lu. Hello, my name is Vivian. What kind of family teaches you to be thankful by nearly letting you freeze to death? And why did it take a doorbell camera to finally prove I wasn't crazy? I hadn't spoken those words out loud in 16 years, but they never stopped echoing in my head. Freezing will teach you gratitude. That's what she said, flat, cold, like reading from a script she'd rehearsed her entire life. Sometimes I hear it when I'm microwaving soup. Other times when I open the door to a snowy porch, even just for a package. It was a sentence that cracked something open in me, and the cold rushed in before I knew how to close it again. My name is Vivian. I'm 32 now, living a few hours away from Fargo, North Dakota, where everything began and where, in many ways, I ended. People think trauma is like breaking a bone, you heal, you move on. But some traumas don't heal clean. They calcify around you. They change how you move, how you speak, even how you breathe. That night in December still sits in my chest like a splinter. It started like any other. The quiet tension, the stifled air. I had just walked in from school. My math teacher had emailed home about the bruises on my arm. She asked questions I hadn't meant to answer. I told her the truth. Yura had grabbed me hard when I wouldn't let him cheat off my calculus homework. I didn't think it would go beyond that room. It did. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. Maris didn't look at me once. She passed the salad with that tight-jawed smile she wore whenever company was around or when she was suppressing rage. My brother Yura, smug as always, played with the food like he was waiting for dessert, something cruel and sweet. She waited until I finished clearing the table, then called out casually, "Vivian, trash day tomorrow. Go grab the bin from the curb." I hesitated. The temperature had dropped sharply since dusk, and the wind had that needle-like bite only Fargo could perfect. I was in socks, a thin sweater, my school jeans, no coat, no boots. But I knew that voice. I knew better than to say no. I opened the front door. The wind hit me like a slap. Snow blew sideways, slicing across my face. I stepped out, teeth already beginning to chatter. Behind me, the door clicked. I spun around. She was on the other side of the glass, arms crossed, gaze calm as a lake in winter. Then her lips moved. I saw the words even before I heard them through the door. Freezing will teach you gratitude. I pounded on the glass. Maris, please. I'm sorry. I'll explain to Mr. Jenkins. I'll take it back. She didn't flinch. I watched her flick the deadbolt shut. A moment later, the overhead porch light clicked off. The house went dark. I stood there barefoot in snow, my breath fogging up the night, heart thudding in my throat. I tried the handle, locked. Back door, maybe. I ran, slipping once on the icy walkway, catching myself on a railing. My socks were soaked. Numbness had already started to creep into my toes. The back door was locked too. The garage, maybe the keypad. I punched the code. Nothing. She'd changed it. She'd planned this. I turned toward the neighbors' homes, the Johnsons on one side, the Pattersons on the other. Their windows glowed soft and warm. I knew they were home. I could hear the hum of the TV from the Johnsons, but when I approached and knocked, the curtains shifted slightly and then, nothing. No one came. I crossed the street to the Patterson house. Snow cut into the bottoms of my feet through the soaked socks. That's when I saw the red light. Mrs. Patterson had installed a doorbell camera, one of those smart ones. She'd shown it off during a block party once, said it recorded everything. I stood in front of it now, trembling, the wind pressing my hair into my face. I pressed the bell. A tone sounded, then silence. Mrs. Patterson, I said as loud as my frozen throat could manage, please, I know Maris said things, but I'm out here and I need help. Please. The camera's red light blinked steadily. The front window's curtain moved. For a second, her face appeared. Her hand touched the door's edge, but she didn't open it. I slid down the wall, curling into myself. My fingers stung, then stopped stinging. My lips felt swollen, cracked. I wrapped my arms around my knees. Inside the Patterson house, I could hear laughter. Someone changed the TV channel. Snow piled around my legs. The porch's stone floor pulled heat from my body like a thief. I looked at the camera. I'm 16, I whispered. My name is Vivian. My mom locked me out. No answer. I don't remember losing consciousness. Just that everything slowed, the wind faded, my body stopped shivering, and that little red light still blinking was the last thing I saw. Before everything went dark, I heard a laugh, faint, high-pitched, familiar. It was Yora. From his window, he was filming. I didn't move for what must have been minutes. The cold had slowed everything, my thoughts, my heartbeat, even my shame. But the sting of being seen never froze over. I could feel it, the weight of eyes from somewhere behind the curtains. I wasn't just locked out. I was on display. Then, above me from a second-story window, came laughter. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't nervous. It was deliberate. When I looked up, I saw Yora, backlit by the TV glow from his room, holding his phone with that familiar smug grin. The window didn't muffle much. Say cheese, Ice Queen, he shouted. My legs wouldn't let me stand, but I lifted a hand in a half-hearted wave, sarcasm my only defense left. He zoomed in. The next morning, I was in a hospital bed with heated blankets wrapped around my legs and 4 fluids running cold through my veins. I had no memory of getting there. A nurse told me Mrs. Patterson found me when she stepped out with her dog, hours later. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know how long I'd been frozen in place. What I did ask for the moment I could move my fingers was my phone. When it powered on, the notifications came in like hail, group chats, mentions, shares. My name was everywhere, and not because people were worried. Yora's video had gone viral in our school network. The caption he chose still stung more than the frostbite, Lil Snowflake having a meltdown. One of his friends had commented, "Damn, bro. That's your sister. Savage." Another replied, "She always been like this or what?" No one asked why I was outside in socks in the middle of a blizzard. No one questioned why a teenage girl would be left out there to begin with. They just laughed. The comments piled up, each one another weight on my chest. I didn't even cry. I think my body had used up all its tears in the snow. Later that day, while I stared blankly at the ceiling, my homeroom teacher's email popped up. She had forwarded a message from our principal, subject line, celebrating integrity. It congratulated Yora for maintaining composure under family stress and for not retaliating in public when targeted. Apparently, my live-streamed suffering was rebranded as evidence of his emotional strength. Maris must have worked fast. The narrative had flipped completely. A few hours after that, a knock came at my hospital room door. I expected a nurse, maybe even someone from social services. Instead, it was Mrs. Keller from 2 houses down. She walked in holding a plastic container of brownies and a Hallmark card with "Thinking of you" printed on the front. "For your brother," she said cheerily. "Tell him we're so proud of how he's handled all this." She didn't even look me in the eye. That night, the hospital room felt colder than the porch ever did, not physically, but emotionally. At least outside, the cold made sense. It followed rules. Wind blew, snow fell. It didn't lie. People did. I scrolled through the school's anonymous message board, thread after thread discussing the drama at Yora's place. Some thought I was on drugs. Others insisted I'd made up the abuse claim. A few debated whether I'd intentionally staged the whole thing for attention. One post said, "I heard she hit her mom. Bet she just snapped again." It was like reading a fictional version of myself, a character I didn't recognize, manipulative, violent, unstable. Maris hadn't just locked me out of the house. She'd locked me out of my own identity. And people bought it. In that moment, I realized something chilling: my story wasn't mine anymore. It had been claimed, edited, and redistributed without my permission. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the comment count rise. Around 2 a.m., a message popped up from a username I didn't recognize. "Hey, just so you know, I believe you. This isn't funny. It's abuse." It was the first message in hours that didn't call me names, but it was quickly drowned out. Someone replied, "Oh, please. You don't even know her. Stay in your lane." I stared at the screen, wondering what lane I was supposed to be in: the one where victims keep quiet, the one where daughters are supposed to be grateful no matter what. A nurse came in to check my vitals. I asked if she had a phone charger. She hesitated, then handed me one from the drawer. "Don't stress yourself, honey," she said softly. "The internet moves fast. People forget." I nodded politely, but inside I knew this wouldn't be forgotten, not by me. I plugged in the charger and waited for my phone to light up because I needed to keep watching. Not out of obsession, but because if I didn't control the narrative, someone else would. And so, I began documenting everything they didn't want the world to see. It started with a notebook the nurse gave me, intended for journaling feelings, therapy prep maybe, but instead of feelings, I wrote names, times, specific lies. I wasn't going to beg for belief anymore. I was going to build a case. I wrote Patterson in the corner of a fresh page, circled it, underlined it. Then I drew a tiny red dot beside her name. It represented the light on her doorbell camera, the one that never stopped blinking, even as I did. From the hospital bed, I tried not to look down at my feet too often. The bandages reminded me that I'd been found half frozen, not rescued. That mattered more than anyone wanted to admit. Each beep of the heart monitor was a metronome to my memories. And in those slow, sterile hours, I couldn't stop thinking about the doorbell footage. She had it. She saw everything. She didn't help. When I was 12, Mrs. Patterson used to give me apple slices in a napkin when I played with her grandkids. She'd let me sit at the kitchen island and talk while she folded laundry. And once she told me, "You're a good kid, Vivian. You think too much, but that's better than not thinking at all." She thought I was a good kid. So why had she walked away that night? I rang that bell 5 times, not once, not twice, 5. I remember because my thumb hurt afterward. I'd pressed so hard, like I could wring my way back into humanity. But all I got in return was that red light blinking like a silent metronome. I wrote her a message through the neighborhood app, simple, direct, measured. "Hi, Mrs. Patterson. I hope you're doing okay. I was wondering if there's any chance the footage from your doorbell the night of December 18th still exists. I remember seeing the red light. If it's still saved, it could really help. I'd be very grateful. Vivian." I waited all day. No reply. By evening, I sent it again, this time shorter, just checking in. "I really need that video if it still exists. Thank you." 5 hours later, a single sentence appeared beneath her name: "I'm sorry. I don't want to get involved." The words hit harder than the snow ever had. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed my eyes and remembered the other faces, the Johnsons, the Gwynns, every window that dimmed when I approached, every curtain that swayed then stopped. This wasn't just about one neighbor anymore. It was a neighborhood-wide pact of silence. Maris had warned them, of course. I saw it happen in slow motion, even before the night of the storm. A few weeks earlier, she hosted a small gathering, just coffee and cake for the block, she said. I wasn't invited. I only saw glimpses through the hallway mirror as people came in with half-baked smiles and 2 polite nods. Afterward, she told me I had to let them know what's been going on. "It's better if they hear it from me," she said. "That way, they're not confused when things escalate." Escalate. That was the word she used. I remember standing in the kitchen the next morning holding my cereal bowl, thinking, she's laying groundwork. She was building the story before it needed to be told. Like always, people get scared when girls act out, she told the mailman once when I was within earshot. And she smiled as she said it, that perfect mom smile, not too wide, not too forced, just enough to signal, I've got this under control. I wasn't acting out. I was existing outside her narrative, and that was enough. And she hated that. A few days after I was discharged from the hospital, I found an old folder in the back of my closet buried under sweaters. It was faded yellow, the edges curled. Inside was something I hadn't thought about in years, a copy of the acceptance letter from the Northern Science and Engineering Residency, a boarding program I'd applied to the summer before sophomore year. I had never told anyone I'd been accepted. I hadn't needed to. The envelope had been ripped in half the day it arrived. Maris held the pieces in one hand, coffee in the other. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Only strangers abandon their families." I still remember the look in her eyes, not panic, not fear, contempt, like I was betraying her by simply wanting something for myself. I tried to argue. I told her it was a scholarship, that I'd earned it, that it could set me up for college, that I wanted to go. She cut me off, "Not my daughter. You don't run away when things get hard." That night, I cried into a towel behind the locked bathroom door, biting it to muffle the sound. In that same folder, taped to the back, was a printout from the program's website. It had photos of dorms, lab equipment, snow-covered pines, the kind of snow that came with choice, not punishment. I looked at it for a long time. My hands trembled, not from cold this time, but from the sharp clarity of what had been stolen. I could have left years ago, but I didn't because I still believed that if I tried harder, if I just behaved better, maybe one day Maris would look at me and see a daughter instead of a defect. I know better now. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched how long ring footage is stored by default. Up to 60 days, it said, unless manually deleted or downloaded. It had been exactly 22. I texted Mrs. Patterson again, this time just 3 words, "Please, it matters." No reply. I refreshed the screen. Nothing. I stared at the blank space where her response should have been. Then I whispered to the quiet, "But you already were involved." That night, I stopped asking for warmth and started preparing my fire. The apartment was quiet when I got home from the hospital, and the air had that stillness I used to associate with Sunday evenings before Maris made even those feel like waiting rooms for disappointment. I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor. A box of old notebooks spilled around me like loose memories. Somewhere in this pile was a tool she'd used to silence me years ago. I needed to find it, not because I missed it, but because I knew 4:15 the police wouldn't believe me without proof that subtle abuse exists. The journal had a pale blue cover, faded from years under my mattress. I remembered the texture of the paper, the way the binding creaked slightly when I flipped it open. I hadn't looked at it in years. It still smelled faintly of lavender. She'd sprayed it with something back then to make gratitude feel soft. The title page was written in her hand, Vivian's Gratitude Journal. Underneath, she had drawn a smiley face. I stared at it for longer than I should have, trying to remember what kind of mother draws a smiley face above a list of commands. Write 3 things you're thankful for about your family. Every day. That was the rule. No exceptions. If I ever missed a day, she'd sit me down at the dining table and make me write double. "You don't skip brushing your teeth," she used to say. "So you don't skip brushing your heart either." I turned the pages slowly. The early entries were innocent enough, "I'm grateful that Mom buys my clothes," or "I'm grateful Yora walks me to the bus stop." But as the months went on, they changed. The phrasing stiffened. The sentences grew shorter, colder. "I'm grateful Mom reminds me not to be selfish. I'm grateful Yora teaches me to stay quiet." One entry stopped me cold. It was a childish drawing, a stick figure curled up on a rectangle, snow scribbled in blue crayon all around it, a red dot floating above the scene like a camera light. I had drawn the night before it happened. I closed the book and breathed in deeply. Then I opened my email and started a draft to the police department's family services liaison. Subject line, "Evidence of psychological conditioning." It felt absurd typing those words, but they were true. I attached 4 scanned pages, 3 entries, 1 drawing, and clicked send. A few days later, I was asked to meet with a detective. She seemed kind, wore a sweater that looked homemade, and offered me a cup of tea, which I declined. It was her eyes that struck me. They had the quiet recognition of someone who's heard too many stories that should have ended differently. We talked about the journal. She asked if Maris had ever used it as punishment. I said yes. I said she used my compliance as currency. She told people I was working through behavioral challenges. I explained she made it sound like I was just difficult. The journal was part of that, proof to others that she was trying. The detective nodded. She didn't say much, just wrote notes and circled a few phrases I'd used. Psychological programming, she said softly. That's hard to prove, but it helps. That night, I returned home to a voicemail on my phone from Maris. Her voice was steady, too steady. Hi, Vivian. I understand you've been reaching out to people again. I know this is all very overwhelming for you, but I want to remind you that reopening old wounds isn't healthy. Let's try to move forward, not backward. She ended with, "You're loved. Don't forget that." That's how she always ended manipulation, with something soft enough to confuse. A few hours later, I received a call from the detective. Maris had shown up to the precinct, calm, polished. She brought a flash drive. It's video surveillance from their home, the detective told me. Footage of you yelling, throwing books. We have to review it, of course. Just wanted you to know. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice even. I know that video. I remember the day. It was from a year ago when my dog died. She didn't mention that. The detective said carefully, in fact, she claimed it was recent, claimed it was part of a pattern. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just thanked her and hung up. Later that night, I went online, and there she was again. A new article titled "When Mom's the Real Victim" had just been posted to our local news website. There was a photo of Maris outside the precinct, smiling gently, hand on her chest as if in prayer. The headline praised her composure, called her brave. Even in the midst of family turmoil, Maris Viv remains calm, collected, and deeply maternal. Her quiet strength inspires others navigating the complexities of raising teenagers in today's challenging world. The comment section was a battlefield. She's handling this so well. That daughter of hers seems like trouble. Teens are so dramatic these days, always playing the victim. Can't imagine what it's like raising someone that unstable. One comment simply said, "I'd leave her outside too." I slammed my laptop shut. For the next few days, I tried to ignore it. I focused on rest, on keeping quiet, on surviving. But it kept spreading. Each day her image circulated further, polished, perfect, painful, and each day my inbox filled with silence. So I changed tactics. I created a second email address under a different name and used it to contact the neighbors again. I asked if anyone still had footage. I begged in subtle ways for just one copy of the truth. One neighbor replied with a single sentence, "Maris threatened to sue me if I ever speak on that night." Another email bounced back, blocked. A third never responded. It was like being erased in real time, one household at a time, one person at a time. I wasn't just trying to prove a memory. I was trying to prove I had existed at all. Back in my bedroom, I reopened the journal and flipped to the very last page. It was blank except for 3 words written in a child's handwriting, "I want out." I traced the crayon letters with my finger. They weren't just a plea. They were a prophecy. The next morning, a letter lay on my desk, unopened. I had slept maybe 3 hours, but my mind felt sharp, alert. I didn't need coffee to wake me up, just the echo of Maris's handwriting on the envelope and that condescending curve she always used when writing my name, Vivian. It read, like I was a problem to be solved. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I reached for my phone and scrolled through my inbox. I didn't expect anything, maybe another blocked message from a neighbor or another flagged post, but there it was. A voicemail. Unfamiliar number. For a few seconds, I debated pressing play. Then I did. The voice that came through was breathy, unsure. "Vivian." "Hey, it's Anna from junior year. I don't know if you remember me. We sat near each other in AP Bio. Look, I saw that clip, the one from the porch. I had no idea what you were going through. I thought you were just, dramatic. That's what everyone said. That's what Maris made it sound like. I'm so sorry I ever believed her. I should have said something back then. I should have asked if you were okay. She paused. I hope you are now. Then it clicked off. I sat there, phone resting in my lap, and just breathed. It wasn't a grand apology. It didn't erase anything, but it cracked something open. Anna had been one of the kids who used to laugh when Yura made comments about me. She was never cruel, but never helpful either. Her voice was shaky, unsure, and real, and that made it matter. I finally opened the envelope. It was exactly what I expected, an attempt at control disguised as care. Vivian, it began. I hope you're settling back in and finding clarity. I understand you've been communicating with people, which is your right, but I ask you to consider the full implications. Rehashing family tension can be damaging, not just to you, but to others who care about you deeply. Please don't let pain become a performance. You've always been imaginative. Let that imagination guide you forward, not backward. Love always, Mom. My fingers clenched the paper so tight it tore in the middle. Imaginative, as if I had made it all up, as if trauma was something I conjured for applause. The next time I opened my laptop, I had a purpose. I didn't go to Reddit or Facebook or the comment sections of local news sites. I went to my photo library. I scrolled back to the image I had taken, shaky, blurry, but unmistakable. It was me, curled on the Pattersons' porch, my silhouette barely visible in the dark, the porch light above casting a faint glow on the snow. You couldn't see my face. You could barely see my body, but it looked like someone had dropped a coat over a scarecrow and walked away. I uploaded it to Instagram. No caption, just the image. For a while, nothing happened. A few likes, a comment asking if it was art, another saying dark but beautiful. Then someone shared it to Twitter. Then it caught on. By midnight, it had thousands of views. Comments began pouring in. Whose story is this? Is this a real person? Where was this taken? I didn't reply. The image spoke louder than anything I could say. Still, I wasn't done. That post was the match. Now I needed the fire. I opened my notes app and started writing, this time not to the police, not to the neighbors, to the world. My name is Vivian. I am not unstable. I am not dramatic. I was 16 years old when my mother locked me outside during a snowstorm. I had no shoes. I had no coat. I had no way in. My brother filmed me from the window. My neighbors watched from behind their curtains. I bled through my socks. I collapsed. I woke up in a hospital bed with 3 missing toenails and a social worker who didn't believe me. I was told I was working through a difficult phase. I had the scars to prove I wasn't. I was punished for telling the truth. And now I'm telling it again. I hit post. I went to sleep. The next morning, it had already been taken down. A takedown notice was in my inbox, legal language cold and distant from a firm in Maris's city claiming defamation, claiming privacy violation, claiming damage to reputation. I stared at the email for a long time, then laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. She wasn't just trying to discredit me now. She was trying to erase me entirely, but she'd forgotten something. This time, I wasn't alone. By noon, screenshots of my post were circulating on other accounts. People were reposting it, sharing the image, adding their own voices. Some wrote, "This happened to me too." Others said, "This is why kids don't speak up." One woman replied, "You're not alone. I see you." I watched the ripple grow into a wave. And that was when I knew I had struck a nerve, not just in my town, not just in my story, but in people. And Maris, perfect, polished, always in control, Maris was losing grip. I printed the takedown notice, folded it neatly, and slid it into the mirror frame in my room. Then I looked at myself. You taught me gratitude, Mother, I whispered. And now I'm returning the lesson. By the time the sun came up, I had already scheduled 3 posts and emailed 2 journalists. My voice didn't come from my mouth that morning. It came from every typed word, every screenshot, every name I refused to blur out. I wasn't whispering anymore. I was done asking for permission. A nurse stopped by my apartment around 8 a.m. for a follow-up wound check. I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a bandage peeled halfway off when she glanced down at my chart and paused. You know, she said gently, like she was walking barefoot over glass, your file? It lists previous damage, frostbite, smaller, healed, not recent. I looked at her, then at the scars along my toes, still pink and sensitive. I hadn't even remembered the first time, but my body did, she continued. It's noted from an ER visit when you were 12, mild hypothermia and early-stage frostbite. I flagged it for the caseworker. Thank you, I said. The words came out dry. That wasn't a thank you born from relief. It was acknowledgement of facts, of patterns, of proof. 3 hours later, I got a knock at my door. This time it wasn't another package or a well-meaning neighbor trying to offer soup. It was a woman from Family Protective Services. Her badge looked newer than her coat. She had the kind of tired eyes that came from years of reading too many horror stories disguised as parenting. She sat across from me, pen ready. We're reviewing patterns of concern in the household, particularly involving prior unreported incidents. Unreported. That word sat like lead in the middle of the room. I handed her the chart the nurse left me, my old ER intake form, a photo of my feet from the last hospital visit. This is what happens, I said slowly, when nobody asks questions. She didn't say much, just nodded and took the folder like she'd been waiting for it. She left quietly. It was only later that afternoon, while I was microwaving soup and staring at the corner of the floor where my dog's bowl used to sit, that my phone vibrated with a number I hadn't seen in more than a decade. Dad, the caller ID read. It might as well have punched me in the chest. I didn't answer at first. I let it ring through the way you do when you're not sure if answering makes you brave or stupid. Then it rang again and again. The 4th time, I picked up. Viv, he said. I saw the photo, the one of the porch. He exhaled like he'd been holding something in for a lifetime. I didn't know. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know it had gotten that far. His voice was older than I remembered, more fragile. Or maybe I was just older now, finally hearing it without the filter of fear or longing. You left, I said. I know. There was a pause. I want to explain, he continued, if you're willing to hear it just once. I agreed to meet him the next day at a diner halfway between our towns. I didn't tell anyone, not the nurse, not the caseworker, not even Anna, who had texted again the night before to say, I'm still with you. The diner was one of those off-highway places that always smelled like coffee and slightly burned bacon. He was already seated when I walked in, a manila envelope beside his coffee mug. He stood up when he saw me. You look just like her, he said. I hope not, I replied, sliding into the booth. He nodded, not offended, just tired. She did the same thing to me, he said after a beat. Not with snow, with silence, with rules, with this constant image management. I lost friends. She told them I'd cheated on her, that I was emotionally unstable. She told people I was dangerous. I left before I became what she said I was. I blinked at him. And you left me with her. His face twisted. I know. I hate myself for that. I thought if I left, she'd focus on herself or maybe find someone new. I didn't think she'd turn it all on you. He reached into the envelope and pulled out a photo. I was a baby, maybe 2, in a little blue coat. His hands held me up in front of a snow-covered tree. I was laughing. That was the last day she let me take you out alone, he said. The conversation stretched for over an hour. He told me about the emotional abuse, the manipulation, the twisting of truth until it no longer resembled reality. He told me about how she convinced everyone he was the problem and how he let her. She doesn't break you, he said softly. She makes you invisible. I stared at my coffee, stirring it even though I hadn't added anything. What do I do now? I asked. He looked me in the eye. What no one ever did for me. Speak. When I got home, I opened my laptop. I didn't write a long post this time, just attached the file and typed one line. This is what history looks like when no one asks questions. I hit send and posted it on every platform I had access to: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, even an old blog I hadn't touched since high school. I made the document viewable to the public. No more hidden wounds. No more secrets. Within an hour, a child welfare organization had retweeted it. Within 2, a social workers union responded with, "We stand with survivors. We hear you." The narrative had shifted. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just sat still, staring at the post, and in a quiet corner of another town, I knew Maris was reading it too. The car idled outside the cafe for 5 minutes before I convinced myself to go in. My hands wouldn't stop twitching on the steering wheel, palms slightly damp, like my body was trying to prepare me for either a courtroom or a funeral. In truth, it felt like both. I checked my phone again. No new messages. The email from the night before simply read, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Dalton's Cafe. Ask for me." I had no idea if this was a trap, a hoax, or something worse, but I'd followed my gut this far, and it hadn't steered me wrong yet. Inside, Dalton's was the kind of place you only found in small towns that used to be busier: vinyl booths, glass syrup bottles, a bell that jingled when you opened the door. I spotted her before she saw me. Mrs. Patterson, hair neatly pinned up, scarf tucked into her collar, fingers wrapped tightly around a plain ceramic mug. She looked smaller than I remembered, smaller and older. I approached slowly. When our eyes met, she didn't flinch, just gestured to the seat across from her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I should," I answered honestly. Her voice trembled even as she tried to steady it. "I've watched it every night since that day. The footage. I couldn't sleep after it happened. I thought about calling, about stepping in, but she broke off, swallowing hard. I was scared of her, of Maris." "I know," I said. "She's good at making people afraid of doing the right thing." She reached into her purse and slid a small USB drive across the table. "I saved it before she started calling people, before the story changed." I stared at the tiny piece of plastic between us like it was a loaded gun. "I didn't help you that night," she said. "But maybe this will help someone else." I nodded, barely trusting myself to speak. Later that afternoon, in the quiet of my apartment, I sat at my laptop with trembling hands. The drive clicked into place, and the screen lit up. The timestamp read December 18, 8:42 p.m. The footage was crisp, better than I expected. Full color, clear audio, my voice, my body, my shaking limbs. It was all there. The snow collecting on my shoulders, the way I rang the doorbell again and again, the tears that froze as they fell. But what broke me most wasn't my own suffering. It was the background, Maris's voice, faint but distinct through the screen door. "She needs to learn. Let her stay out. Don't open the door." And Yora, laughing. Laughing like it was a joke. Filming me from the window, then ducking down when I noticed him. 35 minutes. That's how long I lay there. 35 minutes of silence. No one came. I clipped the segment, added subtitles, and uploaded it without commentary, no hashtags, no caption, just the truth. It didn't take long. By midnight, the video had already been reposted hundreds of times. By morning, it was everywhere. Then the crayon drawing surfaced. I don't know how it started. Someone said it was a teacher who first posted it, someone else said it was the child's mom. Either way, the image appeared online: a stick figure girl curled up in a pile of blue scribbles, a square building with a red blinking dot, and a caption that read, "She said this is what happened to the girl next door." That drawing moved people more than the video ever could because it wasn't trauma filtered through screens. It was innocence recognizing injustice. The internet didn't just react, it erupted. Hashtag #IamVivian started trending within hours. Then hashtag #freezingIsNotParenting. Journalists began calling. Activists reposted it. Child advocacy groups added it to campaign banners. The video was played on local news that evening, then CNN. The story was no longer mine. It belonged to the country now. People wrote emails. They donated to youth shelters. Survivors of childhood abuse began sharing their own stories. And Maris, she went silent. Reporters showed up at her office, at her house. The same front porch where I had collapsed was now swarmed with cameras. Yora's school suspended him, not for the video itself, but for online misconduct and failure to report abuse, whatever they called it. It was a start. I didn't relish their downfall. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in accountability. The next day, I stood in front of the house where I nearly froze to death. This time, I wasn't alone. There were cameras, yes, but more than that, there were people, supporters, neighbors who had once shut their blinds but now stood holding signs. We failed you. We believe you. Never again. I didn't knock. I didn't need to be let in. I stepped forward, lifted one hand, and then lowered it slowly, not in surrender, but in closure. That house would no longer define me. It would not be the place where my story ended, but where it began. The courthouse smelled like lemon disinfectant and cheap coffee, the kind that lives too long on a hot plate and always tastes faintly burned. Reporters clustered near the front entrance, their badges swinging on lanyards, microphones clutched like weapons. I didn't walk past them. I walked through them, shoulders straight, jaw set. The press didn't matter. Not today. I wasn't here to explain myself. I was here to finish the sentence Mara started when she told me that freezing would teach me gratitude. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations. I recognized some faces, neighbors, old classmates, even a few people who had once smiled at Maris like she was the patron saint of suburban order. Now they watched her like she was a headline. Maris sat at the defendant's table, perfectly composed. Her blouse was ivory, her hair pinned back, her expression unreadable but calculated. She didn't look at me, not once. Yora wasn't in the room. He wasn't allowed. His case would be handled separately. I took my seat behind the prosecution's table. My attorney nodded to me with quiet reassurance. Then it began. Opening statements were short, precise. The state attorney spoke first, laying out the basics: child endangerment, emotional abuse, failure to protect. Then her defense attorney, some man with polished shoes and eyes that didn't blink often, claimed this was a misunderstanding rooted in a troubled family dynamic. That was the phrase they loved to use, troubled, as if trauma was just poor communication over dinner. Then came the moment the prosecution requested to enter new digital evidence into the record, the ring footage from Mrs. Patterson's camera. The judge approved. The lights dimmed slightly as the monitor came to life. There I was, 16 years old, barefoot, soaked, my body folding into itself like a tent in a storm. "Please," I said on screen. "My name is Vivian. I'm 16. My mom locked me out." Yora's laugh echoed through the speakers, casual, careless. Then Maris's voice: "She needs to learn. Let her stay out." No one moved. You could hear the air vents hum above us. Even the judge leaned forward, knuckles tight against the bench. The clip continued. 35 minutes passed in real time, me shivering, falling, going still, the red light blinking, the silence louder than anything. When the screen went black, no one spoke for several seconds. Then the prosecutor cleared her throat and said, "No further questions." The rest of the day unfolded like a slow collapse. Witnesses took the stand: teachers, hospital staff, even Mrs. Patterson herself. She cried softly, saying, "I thought staying out of it would protect my family. I didn't think not helping would become part of the harm." Then it was my turn. I told the truth, not with rage, not with pity, just with clarity. "I didn't want this to be public," I said. But silence didn't save me. Evidence did. I didn't cry. My voice didn't break because the worst of it wasn't happening anymore. It had already happened. This was just the report. By the time closing arguments wrapped, the gallery was stone silent. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Maris was found guilty of felony child endangerment and misdemeanor emotional abuse. The judge, a woman in her 60s who never smiled once during the trial, sentenced her to 12 years without parole. She not only endangered her daughter's life, the judge said, but orchestrated a campaign to discredit her and suppress the truth. As they led Maris away in handcuffs, she finally looked at me. Her face didn't twist in anger. She didn't cry. She didn't scream injustice. She looked like she did every morning before school, like she was waiting for someone else to speak first. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Outside, the sky was overcast, but the air felt lighter, softer. A breeze passed through the courtyard, and for once, I didn't flinch. That afternoon, Anna, yes, Anna from high school, posted a fundraiser for my legal costs and medical recovery. The caption read, "We believed the wrong person. Let's do right by the one who spoke up." It reached its goal in under 48 hours. People donated. Strangers messaged. A local church offered trauma therapy sessions. One woman wrote, "My daughter never spoke up. She didn't make it. Thank you for doing what she couldn't." A senator even cited my case during a hearing on child abuse reporting laws. For the first time, I didn't feel like a cautionary tale. I felt like a beginning. I was on the courthouse steps when a news crew approached. One reporter asked, "Vivian, do you have anything you'd like to say on record?" I looked directly into the camera. "You can record now," I said. "This time, I want the world to see." I spent the next few weeks in a kind of quiet that didn't feel empty. After the sentencing, after the interviews, after the whirlwind of public support and angry phone calls and courtroom drama, I needed silence, not the kind Maris used to punish me with, not the silence of locked doors and closed blinds, but the kind that gently asks what you want for lunch, then listens to your answer. Imelda opened her home to me without ceremony. She didn't make me feel like a guest or a project or something she needed to fix. She simply made space. The first night I stayed with her, she handed me a bowl of tomato soup and said, "It's not fancy, but it's hot and I didn't spit in it." It was the kind of warmth you don't realize you're missing until it wraps around you. Not the soup, but the joke, the normalcy, the choice. Her house was small, single-story, carpet that had seen better decades, a recliner older than me in the corner, a cat who didn't like anyone but her, and a shelf of mystery novels she kept threatening to throw away but never would. It was nothing like the home I grew up in. And that was the point. In Maris's house, everything had to be earned: love, trust, even food. You had to be grateful for every basic need met, or you were ungrateful, difficult, troubled. In Imelda's house, I could pour myself a second cup of tea without asking. I could laugh too loud. I could leave a light on in the hallway and not be interrogated about the electric bill. One afternoon, about a month after the trial, we were sitting on her porch. She smoked occasionally, only when she was deep in thought. That day, she tapped a cigarette out of the pack like it was punctuation. "Do you want to stay?" she asked without turning her head. I looked up from my book. "Stay for dinner?" She smiled just a little. "No, sweetheart. Stay for real. Here with me." I didn't answer right away. She took a long drag and said, "I should have fought harder back then. Your daddy didn't know how to win with a woman like Maris. I should have known she'd do to you what she did to him. I let her erase me from your life. I'm not proud of that." I reached for her hand. "You're here now." She nodded, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and muttered something about smoke in her eyes. A few weeks later, I walked across a stage and accepted a diploma. It wasn't a grand ceremony, just a small gathering, part of a restorative education program I'd completed while finishing my final high school credits. I didn't wear a cap and gown, no balloons, but there was a microphone and a crowd and a request for a few words. I almost said no. Then I remembered the girl on the porch, the girl who whispered her name into a blinking red camera. She didn't ask for applause. She just asked to be heard. So I stood up. "My name is Vivian," I began. "And I used to think gratitude was something I owed to people who gave me the bare minimum: food, shelter, a home. I was taught to say thank you even when I was hurting, to smile when I was scared, to be quiet when I was freezing." A few people in the front row leaned forward. One woman wiped her eyes. "But I've learned something in the years since. Gratitude isn't obedience. It isn't silence. And it sure as hell isn't survival. Gratitude is what you feel when someone sees you, Not when they punish you and tell you it's for your own good. I paused. I forgive her, but I don't forget, and that's how I stay whole. I stepped down to a standing ovation. Across town, in a cell with peeling paint and flickering lights, Maris watched the recording of that speech from a small screen on the wall. She didn't blink as I spoke. She didn't look away. When the clip ended, she pressed the rewind button, watched it again and again. Not a single visitor had come since her sentencing. Not a letter, not a call. She was a name no one spoke anymore, and she knew it. But I didn't think about her after that. Not much. She no longer lived in my head or my ribs or my lungs. She was just gone. Instead, I walked forward. One spring morning, I took a different route home from the grocery store and passed by the house I once begged to be let back into. The porch had been repainted, the railing fixed, a fresh wreath on the door. A child's toy car sat near the steps. A little girl looked out through the window, maybe 5 or 6, brown curls, big eyes. She waved. I hesitated, then smiled and waved back. I didn't linger. I didn't need to. Because healing doesn't come when they say sorry. It comes when you no longer need them to. Some wounds don't heal with time. They heal when we choose to stop hiding them. Vivian's story is a reminder that survival isn't just about making it through the night. It's about finding your voice the morning after.